Okay, we are live. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Outlandish Talmud Stories and Outstanding Life Lessons, Class 14. Tonight's topic is the rabbi who desecrated Yom Kippur. Yes, it's a real topic. It's a real rabbi, and it's a real story. And I was thinking about this story for a number of reasons. First of all, I have alluded to the story in the past. In previous classes, and you will see the connection. And it's time that we actually study this story inside and in depth. Second of all, we are coming to the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. And this year especially, everyone is truly thinking about how we're going to celebrate these festivals. Whether we can go to the synagogue or we can't go to the synagogue. Your synagogue is open, it's not open. Just making sure you can hear me. If you can't, let me know. And so we're all so focused on how we're going to celebrate Yom Kippur with our families, with our communities, which is an incredible thing, as difficult and as challenging as it is. So to think about the rabbi who desecrated Yom Kippur sounds like an outlandish thing, but it did happen in the Talmud, of course with a little twist, and I want to share that with you tonight. You can download the source sheet. We have the links on Facebook and on YouTube. We're going to be studying from Rosh Hashanah, page 25a. And I also want to say tonight's class is dedicated in honor of Mendel Wolf's birthday, my son's 11th birthday. So thank you to the sponsor. And if you'd like to sponsor a class, the link is there in the notes. And we would welcome that sponsorship, and you can make a dedication in honor of anyone that you wish. So, you recall that we've spoken about in the past, this is about the end of the first century, beginning of the second century, after the destruction of the temple. The rabbis, the leaders are trying to rebuild Judaism, Jewish Torah, Jewish thought, Jewish community. It's very difficult without the central hub and magnet of the temple. The download is there. Benny, you should find it. Look scroll down in the notes. So, where am I? So we've explored the leader, Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel was the Nasi, the head of the Sanhedrin. And he had the tough job of trying to control everything and making sure that Torah doesn't get splintered. And we've spoken how he used some strong measures sometimes to make sure everybody was stepping into line. And one of the persons that he was often butting heads with was Rabbi Yehoshua. Rabbi Yehoshua was also a very great sage at the time. I want to tell you a little bit about Rabbi Yehoshua so you can understand who we're talking about, and it'll give you more insight into tonight's story. Rabbi Yehoshua is somebody that his colleague, Dosa ben Horkinus, we've learned about Eliezer, the son of Horkinus. This is Dosa, the son of Horkinus. He said that he recalls how Rabbi Yeshua's mother would take him when he was a young baby, take him to the study hall to hear the words of Torah so that his mind and heart would get familiarized with the words of Torah. That's an amazing testament, not only for himself, but also for his mother. Rabbi Yeshua was considered as one of the 5 prize students of Rabbi Yochanan, the son of Zakkai. And Rabbi Yochanan, the son of Zakkai, mentioned some incredible things about this student, Rabbi Yeshua. His name was Rabbi Yeshua, son of Hananiah. Rabbi Yeshua was very humble. He once married the daughter of a Kohen. It's called Bat Kohen. And after marriage, he fell ill. And he said, well, I guess I was not worthy of marrying the daughter of a Kohen. And that's why I'm falling ill. That's how humble he was. I think about that story a lot because I was also privileged to marry the daughter of a Kohen. And I hope I'm somewhat worthy to have my wife as a wife and my in-laws, Cohen family, as my family as well. Rabbi Yeshua was known to be ugly. Yes, the story goes that the daughter of the Roman emperor once told Rabbi Yeshua, it doesn't make any sense. Somebody as wise and as scholarly and as holy as you, and your soul is in the body of such an ugly vessel. Why are you so ugly? How could God do that to you? To which Rabbi Yeshua responded, let me ask you, your father, the emperor, has a huge wine cellar in the basement of his palace, of his castle. What kind of barrels does he store the wine in? So she said, well, like everyone stores in ceramic barrels. So he says, doesn't make sense. It's unbecoming of your father, the emperor, to hold his wine in the same barrels as everyone else. Your father should hold his wine in gold barrels. That would be appropriate for him. So she thought it's a good idea. So she told the person in charge of the wine cellar, make sure you switch all the wines into golden barrels, which he did. The next evening, the emperor ordered a cup of wine for dinner, and the wine tasted disgusting. He went off. And he asked the seller, the guy who brought it, the bartender, what's going on? What happened? And he told him, well, yesterday your daughter told me to switch all the barrels to wine. Now we know wine doesn't do any good to gold, and gold doesn't do any good to the wine. So he'd ask his daughter, what did you do over here? You ruined all my wine and wasted money. So she said, well, I was talking to Rabbi Yeshua and asked him why he's so ugly. And anyhow, we got into the conversation. It's unbecoming of you to have the same barrels as everyone else. You should have wine, gold barrels. So he explained to her, wine needs to be in a ceramic barrel or a wood barrel. So she came back to him and she told him the whole story. So Rabbi Yeshua said, you see, the good wine needs to be in an ugly vessel. So she responded to him, but imagine God could have made you more beautiful. He said, could you imagine how much clever I am because of my ugliness? It's good that my soul and my mind is housed in an ugly body. Which, that story is deserving of its own commentary, but certainly the pursuit of beautifying one's exterior can sometimes come at a great cost of beautifying one's heart and one's mind and one's soul. You have to focus on one or the other. Focus more on your mind and your heart, and less attention on your exterior beauty. So that's a little bit about Rabbi Yehoshua. Now you understand what a great and humble person he was. We're going to begin the text. It's in Rosh Hashanah, page 25a. This is the story. A bit of background so you understand what's going on over here. Once upon a time, before we had cell phones and apps, and for that matter, before we had calendars, how did we know how to set up the Jewish calendar? The Jewish calendar is a lunar calendar. We follow the moon. The moon has a 29 and a half day cycle. That's the month, 29 and a half days. We know we can't have half-day months. And then 12 of those cycles equals a 354-day year, which is the length of a Jewish year. On a leap year, we add another month, another 30 days. But you can't have a month 29 and a half days. You have to make the month either 29 or 30 days, which is why some months are called chaser, somewhat deficient, only 29 days, and some months are shalem, complete months, 30 days. Every year normally has 6 chaser and 6 shalem. 6 times 29, 6 times 30 is the same as 12 times 29 and a half. I hope you follow that. Now, once upon a time, how did we know when it's going to be the new month? So we had to depend on the sighting of the new moon, which meant that people had to go outside and find the new moon. And when 2 people would find the new moon, they would run to the temple, to the Sanhedrin, to the great Supreme Court to give testimony. We saw the new moon. The Bet Din, the judges, would interrogate these witnesses, and if they found them to be correct, where did you see it? What angle? What did it look like? Because remember, they were astronomers also, so they knew how to predict where the moon should be in the sky, so they knew if they were lying or not. And if they passed the test and their testimony was accepted, then the Bet Din said, Mekudash, this day is sanctified, it's Rosh Chodesh. And that meant that they would know if Rosh Chodesh is 29 days and cut it a day short. If no witnesses came, then we knew that it's the next day, maximum the 30th day, that is going to be Rosh Chodesh. So it was all based on the visibility, on the testimony of witnesses who saw the new moon. Based on that, you're now going to understand a little bit about this story. Let's begin. There was an incident in which 2 witnesses came and said, we saw the new moon at its anticipated time, i.e., on the night of the 30th day of the previous month. At the end of 29 days, we saw the new moon. And essentially what they're saying is that this past month should only have 29 days. The 30th day should be designated as the first of the new month. So they interrogated the witnesses, and they sounded like they were legit. However, on the following night, i.e. the start of the 31st, which is often the determinant, of a full 30-day month, it was not seen. Very strange. They came and they said the night before they saw the moon, but the following night the moon wasn't seen. Nevertheless, Rabban Gamliel, who was the head, the Nasi, the president of the court, accepted their testimony and established the new moon on the 30th day, which meant that the month was only 29 days. That this was right before Rosh Hashanah. So Elul, the last month of the year, had only 29 days, which meant the next day, the 30th day, was Rosh Chodesh, which meant it was Rosh Hashanah. Rabbi Dosa, the son of Hyrcanus, disagreed. He said, they're false witnesses. The moon was not around the next night. How could they have seen it the night before? And obviously it was a clear night, so if you could have seen it the night before, you should see it the next night as well. How can witnesses testify that a woman gave birth and the next day her belly is between her teeth? I.e., she's obviously still pregnant. That's a strange expression, a belly between the teeth. Pregnant women have very big bellies, but it doesn't go all the way up to the teeth. But it's an expression, especially if a woman is heavily pregnant and about to go into labor, and often she'll need to crouch down and put her head down to go into a position, and it has the appearance of the belly being between the teeth. So he's saying, if she gave birth, she wouldn't be pregnant anymore. If she's still pregnant, she didn't give birth. If they saw the moon, we would see it again. We didn't see the moon the next night, then the moon was not around the night before. They're false witnesses. We can't accept them. And therefore, Rosh Chodesh is not today, but it's tomorrow, which means the month has 30 days, not 29 days. And Rosh Hashanah is 1 day later. If the new moon was already visible at its anticipated time, how could it not be seen a day later? This was the disagreement of Rabbi Dosa, the son of Hyrcanus, against Rabban Gamliel, the head of the Sanhedrin. Rabbi Yehoshua, a great colleague of the Sanhedrin, he said to Rabbi Dosa, I see the logic of your statement. I agree with you. The new moon must be established a day later. Now here we already smell trouble. Rabbi Gamliel cannot stand when Rabbi Yehoshua disagrees with him. He's already penalized him several times, as we have studied. And here he's going to get wind that Rabbi Yehoshua again disagrees with his ruling of accepting those witnesses. Upon hearing that Rabbi Yehoshua had challenged his ruling, Rabbi Gamliel sent a message to him. Listen to this message. I decree against you that you must appear before me with your staff and with your money on the day which Yom Kippur occurs according to your calculation. According to my calculation, that day is the 11th of Tishrei, the day after Yom Kippur. So let's pick a date. Let's say the disagreement was about Wednesday or Thursday. So we'll use Tuesday and Wednesday, make it simpler. We'll use it like this year. This year Rosh Hashanah is Shabbat and Sunday, right? Now, Rabbi Gamliel said, Shabbat is the first of the month. Friday was the 29th of the last month. Shabbat is Rosh Chodesh. It's Rosh Hashanah. Rabbi Yehoshua, Rabbi Dosa disagreed. They said, no. Shabbat is still the 30th and last day of the previous month. Sunday will be the first of the new month. Sunday will be Rosh Hashanah. Now, there's a big difference here. And one big difference is when it's going to be Yom Kippur next week. According to Rabbi Gamliel, the Rosh Hashanah began on Sunday. Yom Kippur is when? Tuesday. Yes? Tuesday next week. According to Rabbi Yehoshua, according to Rabbi Gamliel, the Rosh Hashanah began on Shabbat. I forgot my example. Shabbat. Yom Kippur is next Monday. According to Rabbi Yehoshua, the Rosh Hashanah began on Sunday. Yom Kippur is next Tuesday. That's a very big disagreement because a lot of questions arise. When should you fast? When should you exercise all the laws and prayers of Yom Kippur? When should you refrain from doing melacha, prohibited labor? When is Yom Kippur? Rabbi Gamliel instructed Rabbi Yehoshua next Tuesday, which according to me is the day after Yom Kippur. According to you is Yom Kippur. I order you to come to me with your staff, meaning carry, and your money. So again, carrying, and it's muktzah. You're not allowed to carry and tamper with money on Shabbat and festivals. And I want you to come to me on that day. In other words, it's like saying, I want you to come to me with your cell phone and with your briefcase, and I want you to drive to me that day. That's what it's like saying. In other words, it's proving that it's not Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is how I have established, not your dissenting ruling. Some commentaries ask, why does he have to bring two things, a staff and the money pouch? Just bring one. One is already a statement that you're violating the festival. a day that you think is the festival. So one commentary writes that if he would just be walking with his stick, well, Rabbi Yeshua was already an older person, and maybe he had a bit of a limp. And the person who needs to walk on a cane, they're allowed to carry their cane on Shabbat and festivals. It's not prohibited, Shabbat and Yom Kippur. It's only prohibited if you don't need that cane for walking purposes. So if he just would have come with his cane, it may not have been apparent that he's publicly violating the Yom Kippur, which he thinks is Yom Kippur. So therefore he said, bring your money pouch also. But if it just would have told to bring your money pouch, a money pouch you can carry on your shirt, under your shirt, it's not very visible. Again, it doesn't have that public appearance of violating the festival. So he told him, carry your staff, and hanging from your staff will be your money pouch. So everything will be visible to the public, how you are agreeing with my ruling, our ruling. Today is going to be the day after Yom Kippur, not Yom Kippur as you have suggested, and that's why you're coming to me carrying these items. Now, Rabbi Yeshua was very distressed about this. His conscience was having a tough time. How's he going to do this on Yom Kippur, what he thinks is Yom Kippur? Rabbi Akiva went and found Rabbi Yeshua distressed that the head of the great Sanhedrin was forcing him to desecrate the day that he maintained was Yom Kippur. In an attempt to console him, Rabbi Akiva said to Rabbi Yeshua, listen to the following words. I want you to feel better about this. I can learn from a verse that everything that Rabbi Gamliel did in sanctifying the month is valid. In other words, even if you disagree about Rabbi Gamliel's ruling that Rosh Chodesh is on Shabbat and not on Sunday, is valid. How do we know this? It says in a verse in the Torah. You probably know this verse because it's the way that we say the Kiddush on a festival. On a festival, we make the Kiddush Eile Moadei HaHashem Mikra'ei Kodesh Asher Tikru'u Otam B'Mo'adam, which means these are the appointed seasons of the Lord, meaning the festivals, sacred days, which you shall proclaim in their season. The festivals which you shall proclaim. Now, the verse indicates that whether you have proclaimed them at their proper time, or whether you have declared them not at their proper time, I have only these festivals as established by the representatives of the Jewish people. God is saying an amazing thing over here. And this, by the way, answers a question that we asked in last class that we never got to answer, so there's another reason why we're studying this story. Remember we said last week there's a midrash that says that the angels come to God and they ask, when is Rosh Hashanah this year? And God answers, Li atem shoalim, you're asking me, how should I know when it is? I just created the festival, but I don't know when it is. Go to the Bet Din, to the court on earth, and they'll tell you when it is. Now what does that mean? Who decides when a festival is? Doesn't God decide when it is? What do you mean we decide? So the answer is as follows. We decide because we're the ones that decide when is a new month. We decide dates. We decide calendar. A month can be 29 days. A month can be 30 days. And the big difference will be, is day A a holy day and day B not a holy day? Or is day B a holy day and day A not a holy day? And that difference of whether the day is holy or not is dependent on a human decision of the court. What they will decide will impact the kind of spiritual energy and the kind of laws that govern that day. That's amazing. It truly is amazing. Look at the control that we have. Shabbat is very different. Shabbat is the seventh day of the week. It's not a particular date, but it's a day of the week. So therefore, every seventh day of the week, no matter how you decided to count your weeks, some nations in history wanted to have 5-day weeks, 6-day weeks. It never worked out, 8-day, 9 days. Doesn't matter. Every seventh day is Shabbat, not because we made it holy, but because God makes it holy. So, as we conclude in the Kiddush, Baruch Atah Hashem, Mekadesh HaShabbat. Blessed is God who made Shabbat holy. The festivals, we say the Kiddush very differently. Baruch Atah Hashem, Mekadesh Yisrael v'Hazmanim. Blessed are you, God, who the Jewish people sanctified this day into a holy day. It's an unbelievable thing. Which is why, by the way, that when it comes to Shabbat, we are encouraged by the law to welcome Shabbat a little earlier, Friday afternoon, before candle lighting and sunset. And we're encouraged to delay the ending of Shabbat a little past nightfall and Saturday night. Why? Because the sanctity of the time from sunset Friday afternoon to nightfall Saturday night, that's God-made. But when you welcome Shabbat 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes earlier, you have transformed a mundane day of Friday to a holy day of Shabbat. That's human-made. You did that. God didn't do that. And the same as if you extend the holiness of Shabbat into Saturday night, which is already the mundane day of Sunday. So there's an incredible human achievement going on over here. So we learn this from the verse in the Torah. Look what the Torah says. There's two ways we can understand it. In the Hebrew, we say, these are the holy days, the festivals, asher tikra'u, which you will proclaim. You don't make up festivals, says God. I make up festivals. I made up Shavuot and Sukkot and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but you proclaim when they are. That's one way we learn it from the verse. Another way we learn it from the verse, and I don't have the original Hebrew in front of you, but it says, Asher tikra'u otam, which you will proclaim them, b'mo adam, in their correct time. But the word otam, which means them, the festivals, is spelled missing a vav. It should be aleph, vav, taf, mem, but it's only aleph, taf, mem. Without vowels, you can read that word a little differently. Instead of otam, you can read it atem. Atem means you. Tikru'u atem, you, says God. You are the ones that proclaim when is the sanctity of the festivals. And as the Gemara says, we have three words otam in the Torah, which are missing a vav. So we have three ways we can learn that atem, atem, atem. And the Talmud says, atem, you proclaim the festival, afilu shegegin, atem afilu mezidin, atem afilu mutin. It's according to your proclamation, even if you accidentally made a mistake, even if you deliberately made a mistake, even if you're completely in error, it's still the festival. You decide it's Rosh Hashanah today. And then you look back and you say, oh, maybe we made a mistake. It doesn't matter anymore. It's irrelevant. And we're going to get more into this later about a court making a mistake. Something to think about. And we spoke about it last week already also. But the fact is, Rabbi Akiva says to Rabbi Yeshua, even if you disagree, the fact that Rabbi Gamliel and the majority consensus of the court established Shabbat as Rosh Hashanah, that's what it is. Even if it's mistaken, that's the law. Because God put that kind of power into our hands. Which tells us about how humans create holiness. Such a powerful idea. There's a teaching from Rav Soloveitchik who talks about writing a new Torah scroll. And when you write a new Torah scroll, and the scribe is hopefully a holy scribe with proper intentions and well-trained, and many scribes have the custom, before they write out God's name, they'll go to the mikveh that morning. They want to be extra holy. So you've written the Torah scroll, you've completed it, it's now been rolled up, you've celebrated the new Torah scroll, it's a kosher scroll. And yet, it's not completely holy. There's a layer of holiness missing. You know when the next layer of holiness, the fulfillment of the sanctity of the Torah scroll will happen? When you go to synagogue and you open the Torah scroll and you start to make a blessing on it and you read from it. Now the human has used their mind, their soul to study and words from the Torah and bless over the Torah. Now the Torah is extra holy. Holiness is created by us, not always by God. We can transform and turn things into holy, and that's why we turn days into holy as well. So, Rabbi Yeshua was a little convinced about this. Okay, so he comes back to Rabbi Dosa, who was the first person, remember, who disagreed with Rabbi Gamliel. And he was trying to, I guess, share what he learned from Rabbi Akiva and thinking maybe he should acquiesce. And Rabbi Dosa tells him as follows, listen, it's more than what you think. Till now, Rabbi Akiva gave like a scriptural source. Now Rabbi Dosa is going to give more of a logical idea. If we come to debate and question the rulings of the court of Rabbi Gamliel, we must debate and question the rulings of every court that has stood from the days of Moses until now. A practical legal argument that says, you have to be very careful when you want to disagree with the court's ruling. Even if you think it's wrong, you have to go with it. Because if you can challenge this ruling, then you can challenge every ruling. And if you could challenge every ruling, then we need to go back in history for the last 2,000-3,000 years and possibly undo and revise every single ruling, which would disrupt history, disrupt society so much. At some point, the court has spoken. At some point, we can no longer keep revisiting. We have to just accept the ruling, even if you think it's wrong. It's the same thing in the secular court today. There's a certain level of appeals you can make, but at some point, no more. Accept it. Now, there are ways that a court can disagree with the ruling of a previous court, and that the Rambam and the Talmud goes through extensively. There's a lot of criteria. The latter court has to be greater in number, greater in wisdom. There's all kinds of conditions. But in general, Rabbi Dosa is saying, be very careful to uproot the ruling of a court, even if you disagree it. At some point, you have to accept it. And he brings a proof for this idea. It says in the Torah, then Moses went up the mountain, and Aaron went up a little bit of the mountain, Har Sinai, Nadav, Avihu, Aaron's two sons, and the 70 elders of Israel. Remember, Moses appointed 70 elders to oversee, to help him in judicial matters and to create mini courts so that they could help most Jewish people, and only really difficult questions would come to Moshe. Now, these 70 elders are never enumerated. Their names are never listed in the Torah. They're just the 70 elders, anonymous. So the Talmud asks, Rabbi Dosa asks, why were the names of these 70 elders not specified? Moshe specified, Aaron specified, Nadav, Avihu, but 70 elders. This comes to teach us that every set of 3 judges that stand as a court over the Jewish people has the same status as the court of Moses. Since it's not revealed who sat on that court, apparently it's enough they were official judges in the Jewish court. If it would tell us that the name of the judge was Rabbi who knows what, so we could say Rabbi who knows what, as the Torah says, he's a verified authoritative judge, but this person in my town, who's he? So the Torah says there's no names to these people. Their only credibility is that they were appointed and recognized and given the power to serve as a court. Well, therefore, in every single generation, when you have 3 judges for a court, who have gone through a proper process of ordination, the traditional way, the way it's been in the Jewish community throughout history, their power, their authority is the very same as those anonymous 70 elders who were Moses' court. So therefore, Rabbi Dosa says, Rabbi Gamliel has spoken, the court has spoken, and it's time to accept the ruling. Don't feel so bad that you're going to carry your stick and your pouch of money on the Yom Kippur, which you think is Yom Kippur. When Rabbi Yeshua heard that even Rabbi Dosa ben Horkanos maintained that they must submit to Rabbi Gamliel's decision, he took his staff and his money in his hand, and he went to Yavna, to Rabbi Gamliel, on the day on which Yom Kippur occurred, according to his own calculation. The previous day was Yom Kippur, according to Rabbi Gamliel. This day is the 11th of Tishrei, according to Rabbi Gamliel, although it's Yom Kippur, according to Rabbi Yeshua. But Rabbi Yeshua was submitting to the consensus of the court, and he drove there, he carried his cell phone there, he took his staff and his money pouch, coming to the court. Upon seeing him, Rabbi Gamliel stood up and kissed him on his head. And he said to him, "Come in peace, my teacher and my student. You are my teacher in wisdom, as Rabbi Yeshua was wiser than anyone else in his generation. And you are my student, as you have accepted my statements despite your disagreement." What a beautiful ending. There's humility on both sides over here. Rabbi Yeshua finally is humble enough to recognize the court's ruling is final. Don't fight it. You don't need to fight it. The Torah has ordained them that their ruling is set. God says, you proclaim when the festival is. So Rabbi Yeshua is humble enough, selfless enough to ignore the way he understands and therefore violates the Yom Kippur of his Yom Kippur. He comes to the court and Rabbi Gamliel says, first of all, my teacher. So he admits, I know you're wiser than me. The reason why I'm the Nasi, I'm the president, is not because I'm the wisest person. I have other talents. I've been given this position. I've inherited the position. My father, my grandfather, it's in the family line, but you're wiser than me. and you're very humble and you're a student of mine that you've accepted my ruling. Now, that's the story of the rabbi who desecrated Yom Kippur. Rabbi Yeshua said Yom Kippur is day, and he still carried his staff in his pouch and he went to visit Rabbi Gamliel in Yavna. So he didn't exactly violate Yom Kippur because he was adhering to the Yom Kippur of the court. That's the twist. So no, don't go ahead and rabbi, listen to me, talking to myself, never a good idea to violate Yom Kippur. Never be like that rabbi who went out playing golf on Yom Kippur. He was getting bored of the service. The cantor was drowning on forever, so he went out to play a round of golf. The angels were furious. God, look at this guy, this rabbi, and he's stepping out for a break and going to play golf on Yom Kippur. God said, don't worry. He starts to play and he has an amazing round. He's only going to play 9 holes. He's short on time, and he hits amazingly 2 shots, 3 shots, and then he hits a hole in one. He's never done it before. And the angels are so disappointed and angry. God, how could you let him play so well today on Yom Kippur? God says, don't worry, I'm doing the harshest treatment to this guy. Who is he going to be able to tell about his hole in one? Right? Okay. I want to extract a few very important teachings from this story. First of all, how do we decide, how do we know what's true? Remember, last week we spoke about when it's man's word against God's word. And God said, if it's your word against mine, you win. Even though I in heaven have my opinion, God still appreciates when he is overpowered by the humans. And why is that and how is that? So we explained, remember, that even though in God's world in heaven everything is truly perfect, and in man's world nothing is ever truly perfect because man is only capable of achieving his or her perfection, which is never the perfection of heaven, the angelic perfection. But God says, I appreciate your mini perfection more than ultimate perfection in heaven, because you have really done a lot of work to achieve that. So your opinion, the way you've interpreted Torah through your mind and effort is more valuable to me than mine. That's what God said. What about when it's human versus human in a court and you have a debate? And one great rabbi, Rabbi Gamliel, says one thing. Another great rabbi, Rabbi Yeshua, says something else. What do you do now? So there's a very important lesson over here. We have a principle that says, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. The words of this person and the words of that person and potentially the words of another person, they're all the words of the living God. You're right, you're right, you're right. You're all right. It's like the rabbi that's listening to a court case between 2 people, and one person presents his case, and the rabbi's listening, is very convincing, and he says, sounds like you're right. Let's hear the other person. He presents his case, he's arguing, no, he owes me money. The rabbi listens again, he's convinced, and he says, well, sounds like you're right. So the rabbi's wife is overhearing the whole conversation. He walks in and she says, my dear husband, they can't both be right. He says, honey, you know what? You're also right. But in Torah, it is that way. You're right, and you're right, and you're right. Because there can be several or even many truths. Very important. When one rabbi deciphers this way, and another scholar or rabbi deciphers another way, it's not that one's right and one's wrong. They may both be right. How can they both be right? I mean, it's just one Torah, it's one God, so there has to be one opinion and ruling. God is not so small. Never make God so small. Human beings have a terrible tendency to turn God into something as small as they are. We're small, we have a very narrow mind, we're very rigid in our minds, and we're very intolerant of others and other things, and we have to stick to our narrow path, and we suspect and we schlep and we kvetch God into our small, unflexible, rigid path as well. Never do that. God is very big. Don't protect God. If you are an authority if you have been trained, if you're studying the Torah based on the traditions since Moses received it from Sinai, and you're following the traditions and you're following the principles how God gave you, how you should interpret the Torah, and you arrive at decision A, and person B does the same methodology with the same adherence to the principles and arrives at decision B, you're right and you're right. Now, at the end of the day, when it comes to halakha, when it comes to law, only one opinion can be enacted into law. Because we have to know, what should I do? Should I do this or should I do that? Well, we have to figure out which one you should do. And there's a system, there's a methodology, how we rule that. Whether it's majority, whether it's this rabbi is always right against this rabbi because of his authority, because of his greatness, we have systems. But even though the law is like this, that doesn't suggest that that person is wrong. Just because I'm right doesn't mean you're wrong. Just because you're wrong doesn't mean that I'm right. It works both ways in the Torah. It's very important to remember this. There's an expression that says, Yesh shiv'im panim la Torah. There are 70 faces, 70 possible interpretations of everything in the Torah. And the number 70 is just like a metaphoric number. It means there's many ways to interpret Torah. Don't think you own or somebody owns the truth. It doesn't work like that. I'll tell you a story, an exception. The exception is, there's a story of the Alter Rebbe, Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the first Chabad Rebbe. Yesterday we celebrated his birthday. So when he was a Hasidic rabbi, he had a lot of opposition from what's called the mitznagdim, the opponents to Hasidic teachings. At that time, it was very strong. He was traveling once, and he visited a city of great Talmidei Chachamim, great Torah scholars. And he walks into the synagogue, and the rabbi is giving a class. And he could see the rabbi, the scholar giving the class, was a little bit not up to the task. A question was raised, a very difficult question in what they were learning. And the rabbi offered one solution. And everybody sitting there said, nah, it's not right. He offered another solution. And now, whatever he offered, he worked harder, everybody rejected all these answers. And the Alter Rebbe was listening in, and he walks up humbly and he says, if you don't mind, I'd like to suggest an answer. And he gives an answer. And all of those scholars in the room, even though they were opponents of Chassidut and of the Alter Rebbe himself, but they were blown away, so impressed by his answer. Razor sharp, exactly, that's the answer. This rabbi was a little humiliated. After the class, he called over the Alter Rebbe and he said, dear Rebbe, you know, your answer was definitely better than my answers. I agree. I really enjoyed your answer. Thank you for sharing that. But why did my students reject all of my answers? I mean, maybe they weren't as good as yours, but they could have been also an answer. Doesn't it say, the principle we said, Yesh shivim panim la Torah, there are 70 faces, 70 possible interpretations. So yours may be the best answer, but mine could have also been one of those 70 answers. So the Alter Rebbe told him, a bit of a sharp answer. The Alter Rebbe told him, the expression in Hebrew is Yesh shiv'im panim la Torah. There are 70 faces, 70 front sides to the Torah. And every panim, every face, has an achor, has a behind. There are 70 faces of the Torah, but every face has a corresponding interpretation that belongs to one's behind, one's rear end. Those are not part of the Torah. And that's how the Alter Rebbe left it off with him. He put him in his place and he walked away. So yes, it's possible that there's an interpretation or a suggestion that is not one of the valid interpretations because it hasn't gone through the proper process and methodology in order to arrive at the answer. It can't be substantiated with the background and the history of the text of the Torah and the many traditions of the Talmud. You have to be careful of that. Not everything somebody says is right. But within the framework, again, of those who are following the system, there could be many correct answers. And just because at the end of the day, the law will be like one of them, it doesn't mean the other person is wrong. Elu va'elu, this is right and that is right. I'll give you an example. A mother and a father of a household. Now this household, like all households should have, this household has principles and values. You know, some households have hanging on their walls, these are the values of our home. It's a beautiful thing. I've seen it in many homes. Sit down with your family and come up with the 10 values of your home. What are the things we believe in? We believe in respect, in honesty, in cleanliness, in whatever it is. You come up with your values. So this household has a value system. And then a question arises from a child. Yes or no? Can he? Can she? Can't they? The father responds one way, and the mother responds another way. Ever happened before? Happens all the time. Is one right and one wrong? No. They're both giving their answer in accordance with the value system of the household because they all pledged to the same system. They arrived at different views of how to handle the situation. Now, at the end of the day, if they're responsible parents, they're going to figure this out together and come up with one decision for the children to follow, because children have to see a unified voice from parents. That keeps a household healthy. But the fact that mother and father had two different opinions doesn't mean one's right and one's wrong. They're both right. And the same thing it is with Torah. Rabbi Yeshua, you felt Yom Kippur is the next day? You're right. Rabbi Gamliel and the whole court felt it's the day before? You're right. Then the court ruled based on majority consensus, Rosh Chodesh is the day before? You're right, that's the law. But Rabbi Yeshua is not wrong. So when we study Talmud, we value every opinion. We could spend days and weeks on trying to understand and figure out an opinion, which is not even the halacha. Why are you studying that opinion if it's not even the halacha and the Shulchan Aruch? Forget about it. Why is it even recorded? Because it's precious and it's truth and it's part of the Torah. So we can take away from here such an important principle in our discussions and disagreements with each other. Today we're living in an environment. I'm not going to go too much off my script, but today we're living in an environment, whether it's politics, whether it's reactions and dealing with coronavirus, or other matters going on into society. And we have very split opinions about what's right and what's wrong and what's correct and what's incorrect. It's okay to have difference of opinions. But today's environment is that my opinion is because my doctor, my research, my mentors, this is what they say and I have faith in them, or this is how I've arrived. And because it's my opinion and I'm right, you are wrong. I'm seeing this now with different families reacting differently with dealing with coronavirus, for example. Some are being a little looser in their restrictions. Some are being a little tighter. That's okay. No one really knows the right answer right now. You're hunkering down in your house and not stepping a foot outside. You're right. You're letting your children go to school and possibly to hook up with one family or whatever, and that's your family you're going to be spending time with. You're right. You're both right. So it's not to say we should be sort of submitting to everyone else and we never can have an opinion. You have to have an opinion. You're allowed to have an opinion. You should have an opinion. And you're allowed to stand up for your opinion and have faith in your opinion. But don't dismiss the other as wrong. When Rabbi Yeshua came to Rabbi Gamliel, he had to bring his staff, his stick, remember? So why? So the simple answer is because Rabbi Gamliel told him to bring his stick. But one of the commentaries point out, even if you're wrong, go with a stick. Be proud. Be confident. It's okay that you're submitting to the law. Okay, the law is going to be not like your opinion, but that doesn't dismiss your opinion as wrong. Value your opinion. Recognize that it is a truth in Torah. Go with your stick. Be strong. Don't be obstinate. Don't defy the law. Go with the law. But don't disappear just because the law was not like you. So this is a very important value in our conversations with each other. If we manage to succeed in respecting another's opinion, even with this not agreeing with their opinion, we would have a much more peaceful world. One last thing I want to talk about. This story of 2 Yom Kippurs. When is Yom Kippur? Yesterday or today? It reminds me of, I'm just going to read this comment. Did Rabbi Dosa ben Horkanos have 2 other witnesses to refute the 2 original witnesses, or did he decide on his own and not have witnesses, and therefore his opinion was accepted by all? Great question. If he would have other witnesses that would come and refute the earlier witnesses, then it would go through the legal process in the court, and either they would or would not accept them. That would be an easy one. The problem here was he didn't have any other witnesses. He was just using the circumstances of how absurd not to see the moon the next night on a clear sky as a clear proof that those were false witnesses. So it is a strange occurrence to call out a false witness not based on another witness. It's true, but he was so certain. And remember, they were astronomers, so they knew about when moons should be appearing. They knew the science behind it. They just wanted the witnesses to confirm it. So it could be he understood the science a little differently than Rabbi Gamliel understood it. That may have been happening as well. Let me tell you about a story in 1940. In 1940, in August, this is during the war years. And Jews were trapped in Poland, in Russia, in Lithuania, other places. But they were trying to escape. So everyone knows, you probably know about the famous Japanese consul in Lithuania. I don't know how to pronounce his name. His name is Mr. Suhigara. And he's been honored today, and he's been recognized by Yad Vashem as a righteous Gentile because he was a hero when he issued about 5,000 forged visas for Jewish people. This was against orders coming from Japan, and he did it nonetheless, courageously. And he managed to help about 5,000 Lithuanian Jews escape. And some of those Jews were actually Polish Jews who managed to cross over to Lithuania, and they got their forged visas, and they managed to escape the war. And they went off to Japan. A lot of them settled in the city Kobe, Japan. And that's where many thousands of Jews settled for quite some time. Later, some went to Shanghai, and then often after surviving the war, moved on to the New World. And you probably know many stories. I know many people who spent time in Shanghai. Not many are alive anymore, unfortunately, and in Kobe, Japan. A lot of the Jews who got visas running to Kobe, Japan were yeshiva students. The yeshivas of Mir, of Tomchei Tmimim of Lubavitch, of Chachmei Lublin. Many yeshiva students got the visas and they went over to Kobe, Japan. And there they built the yeshivas again. There's a very famous picture of all the Mir students in their yeshiva in Japan. And life was built over there. It wasn't easy, but they managed to escape and rebuild. And a lot of the Rashi Yeshiva, Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, and the Amshinover Rebbe, and others went along together with them, and they were the communal leaders there in Kobe, Japan. Now, there was a big, big question. Kobe, Japan is approximately 100 degrees east of Israel on the map. The question became, on which side of the dateline is Kobe, Japan? The halacha talks about the dateline. The dateline, obviously, there has to be a dateline somewhere, because somewhere in this circular earth, there's a point where on this side it's Sunday, and on this side it's still Shabbat. This is my left, you're the right. There's a point where there's a 24-hour difference, right? And then you just go around the cycle like that. So where is that dateline? Now we know where classically the world accepts the dateline, but in halacha it's discussed very much. Is the dateline 90 degrees east of Jerusalem? Is the dateline 180 degrees east of Israel? Or other opinions? There are many opinions, and this is very, very important. Because Kobe fell out somewhere in the middle there. And therefore, it was unclear, halachically, what day of the week it should be. It was known to the locals what day. It followed most of the rest of Europe there. But what is its halachic day? And they sent off questions to many great rabbis who were trying to deal with this, because when is Shabbat? Very big question. Is Shabbat Shabbat, like they keep Shabbat locally? Or is Shabbat really the next day, Sunday, or the day before, Friday? When is it? When do you make Kiddush? When do you do Shabbat prayers? When do you not work? When do you work? When do you put on tefillin? When don't you put on tefillin? So many questions. Many rulings came out. Some rabbis ruled you should follow the local custom. Whatever day the locals say Shabbat, that's Shabbat. Some rabbis said, no. According to the rulings, the way it seems from the Rishonim, from the Jewish commentaries, the other day is Shabbat. And even if it's different than the local practice, Even though the Am Shinava once said it was Sunday and people were observing Shabbat on Sunday, and he said, it's hard to feel Shabbat in a society that's living Sunday right now. Some rabbis said, try to do both. Or on Shabbat, keep Shabbat, but on Sunday, at least refrain from biblical work of Shabbat. But rabbinic work you could do. Do you put on tefillin? Don't you put on tefillin? It was very difficult. The big question, or the even bigger question, came when Yom Kippur was coming. When is going to be Yom Kippur? When should we fast? When is the holiest of days of the year? We don't know. There were some who wanted to fast for 2 days, 50 hours straight, out of doubt. And there were some rabbis who gave them blessings. And we know of students who did fast for 50 hours straight. Other rabbis said, don't you dare fast for 2 days. It's dangerous, it's unhealthy, a time of war, you need your health. And then there was another argument that says, we know that there's a mitzvah to fast on Yom Kippur, but there's also a mitzvah to eat the day before Yom Kippur. Well, if you fast both days, then if the second day is Yom Kippur, then the first day you didn't eat and you were supposed to eat. That doesn't work either. So he ruled you should eat on the day that the locals would think it's Yom Kippur and then fast the next day. There were many different opinions. And the Am Shinava Rebbe was trying very hard to create a unified opinion. He didn't want to have, like the problem in the Talmud, he didn't want to have a community here in Kobe, Japan, everyone doing different things. Imagine it's absurd. Imagine if you're my community in Miami or somewhere else, on Shabbat, half people are keeping Shabbat. On Sunday, another half are keeping Shabbat. It doesn't make any sense. It would not be healthy for a community or healthy for the perpetuation of Torah to the children, the grandchildren. It was a very difficult matter, and it was never fully resolved. So I bring that up because we have, in fact, a story in history where people observed 2 days of Yom Kippur and actually fasted for 2 days straight. So those are the lessons that I wanted to take out from this story. Thank God we know when Rosh Hashanah is. You know, everybody always asks, is Rosh Hashanah early or late this year? I got news, it's not early and it's not late. Yeah, I'm actually reminded of one last story I'll share with you. Talking about truth and truth. What is true? They say about the New York mayor, Fiorello LaGuardia, a mayor in the 1930s in New York. And that was a time of Great Depression. And he was a very unique mayor, and he would really get down and dirty and live with the people. They say he would take rides with fire departments to fires, and he would do raids with policemen. Well, one night he went to a very slum neighborhood, a very poor neighborhood. He went to the court that evening that was open, and he told the judge, you know what, I want to take over for this evening. I want to judge the people. You can go home and take a rest. He takes over the courtroom. In one of the cases, a woman dressed in tattered clothing. She looked completely destitute. She came up for her trial. What was her crime? She stole a loaf of bread from the local grocery. She cried to him. He was the judge. She said, "Dear Your Honor, my daughter got sick. Her husband left her. She has 2 children, my 2 grandchildren. None of us have a job. We don't have a penny to our name. I stole the loaf of bread because there was no food in our house and my grandchildren and daughter were starving." Imagine such a story. The grocery, the person who owned the grocery said, "Nonetheless, you stole bread from me." And he told the judge, if we're going to have a system, a society where we allow to have mercy and people can steal, we're going to have no law and order in the society. It's important to teach a lesson. You cannot steal a loaf of bread. And like this, everybody will learn. And will be a safer neighborhood. Judge Mayor LaGuardia thought about this. He turns to the woman and he says, "Ma'am, you committed a crime. You stole a loaf of bread. I have to punish you. And your punishment is, you have to either pay $10, at that time $10 was a lot of money, $10 to the grocery or 10 days in prison." The woman's face started to turn colors. She started to cry. LaGuardia pulled out his wallet. He pulled out a $10 bill. He had his famous hat. He put the $10 bill in the hat and he told the woman, here is the $10 that you owe. It is now being paid to the court, and the court will deliver it to the grocery. And then he told the whole courtroom, I am penalizing every single person in this courtroom 50 cents for your negligence of living in a city, of creating a city where there could be a woman here who has a sick daughter and 2 grandchildren and they're starving and they have nothing to eat. How could we have a city like this? It's your responsibility to change this. And because this happened, you're all penalized 50 cents. And he handed his hat around the room and everyone put in 50 cents. And at the end, there was $47.50 raised, 10 of which was given to the grocery, and the other remaining money was given to this woman. That's the story of LaGuardia. It's an amazing story. So what's right? Who's true in a court of law? The fact that he penalized the woman, is that right? That's right. That's what the law says. But at the same time, you're going to penalize a woman who has a sick daughter and 2 grandchildren and they're starving and Nebach, she stole because she was hungry, she would have died. You're going to penalize her. How could you do that? You penalize her. Then you pay for it yourself also. You understand how the law is so subtle sometimes. And you have to have levels of legal measurement. What does the law say? But at the same time, where's an element of compassion? Where's an element of some level of kindness, understanding that the Torah is Torat Chesed, it's a book of kindness. So you're right, and you're right, and you're right, and you're all right. And that's why it's such a blessing. You need siyata d'shmaya, you need the blessings of God to be able to arrive at a correct answer in any given situation. To think that we can just rumble off, the law says as follows, and just, but what about this person? Have you studied this person? What are they going through? What's their life conditions? So, Elu va'elu, this is right and that is right, but you have to find the truth to the best that we can to arrive at a correct ruling that God would want for any given situation. Friends, I want to wish you Ketiva v'chatima tova, a blessed new year, Shana tova metuka. Have a good night, and we shall see you next week, same time and same place. God bless you.